everyone, my name is Genevieve Domenico.
And my name is Jacob Q. Jenny and I have spent the last few weeks analyzing voting patterns and their causes. Why certain states vote Republican or Democrat, why certain voters vote Republican or Democrat. And today, we are excited to share our findings with you.
Let's take a look at the 2012 election. And let's take a look at the states that voted blue and the states that voted red. Now let's also list those from poorest to richest. What you can see is that the poorest states tend to vote Republican, and that the richest states tend to vote Democrat.
What implications can you draw from this? What does this say about the voting patterns in the state? We can infer that richer people tend to vote Democrat and poorer people tend to vote Republican. If this assumption is true, we could draw many conclusions about the two parties, their policies drawing the support of which class, and what sort of people run for which party, and so forth.
However, already this is false. If we take a look, we can see that, based off the income of people in said states, that the opposite is true. That richer income families are more likely to vote Republican, and that poorer income families are more likely to vote Democrat. So we came to one question we could answer. What are the political effects of the role of current income, religious, cultural, and racial patterns in American voting?
So, how does this make any sense? While poorer states are red and richer states are blue. At the same time, richer voters are for red and poorer voters are for blue. This was very puzzling at first. There seemed to be no logical explanation. In the red states, there were clearly more lower-income families than higher-income families. And the lower class definitely forms the majority of the American population.
As we explored deeper, we found that there was a third class, one that we ignored.
Do you mean the middle class?
I do mean the middle class. As I was saying, up to this point, we had described everybody in the state between two categories, as in being rich or being poor. However, there was a middle class that interfered with that.
You see, middle-class voters are classified as middle class due to income, but there's another factor in income, and that is the cost of living. Take a look here. The cost of living in a blue state is proportional to the income they make. In fact, when you deduct the cost of living in that state, it is lower than the cost of living in the red state that is proportional to the income that they would make. So in fact, when we subtract the cost of living from the income per capita, red voters are richer on average than blue voters. This means the middle class for the red state that earns less than the middle class of the blue state is in fact making more money, and thusly follows the trend that rich voters vote Republican and vice versa.
In Feinberg's words, what he is trying to say is that in rich states, the middle class is actually wealthier, and in blue states, the middle class is generally poorer. Thus, this explains part of the paradox.
Another point people tend to believe, but is also false, is Americans voting primarily off religion, race, and culture. All these different subgenres tie back to income. Let me bring you up to speed. The middle and upper class generally drives the culture. More specifically, the middle class does. Let's look at it this way. The majority of the population fits into the middle class, like these lines. Below this threshold, these people are making too little money or don't have enough money to enjoy pleasures. Everything above this is the middle and upper class, and they have the money to enjoy things. For New York, that might be pizza, nightclubs, and the Big Apple. California, surfing, Hollywood, and the beach.
These pastimes do affect how people vote. It affects how people connect with the candidate. It affects how people react to certain policies, and it affects people's morals and personalities.
So, what are you trying to say, Danny?
Culture is based off lifestyle, and lifestyle is decided by education, and that is decided by total higher income and total higher tax rate. Thus, a person's lifestyle and everyday interactions are heavily influenced by income.
That's a great observation.
Thanks.
Mission failed. We'll get them next time.
So anyways, how about you tell me about religion then?
Sure. Well, take a look at these charts. What do you see?
Well, from what I can tell, it looks as if the richer class tends to go to church less and the poorer class tends to go to church more.
Yes. What else can you assume from this information?
Attendance of church is generally motivated by tradition, values, and family. Religion plays a big role in social and religious issues. And I quote from Rich State, Blue State, Rich State, Poor State by Andrew Gelman. What isn't happening is that richer Americans would vote based on their economic interests, and poorer voters would be more likely to be swayed by social and religious issues. What he's trying to say is that lower-income families are generally more religious and thusly more Republican. Higher income would tend to make richer voters support the Republicans, but in rich states, higher income is associated with being less religious and more socially liberal. In red states, the poor are more swayed by religiously motivated policies, which is traditionally Republican. The richer voters in red states are motivated culturally to follow religiously motivated policies, which once again are still Republican. In blue states, the poor are still more or less religiously motivated, but the rich tend to be less religious and promote social liberty.
So, what are you trying to say?
I'm trying to say that religion is culturally motivated, and that, of course, as we explained, is once again based off income. So we can make another figure that looks a little bit like this.
Why don't you elaborate on that just a little bit more?
Let's go back to our chart. Culture leads to religion, and religion affects the voting patterns of the rich and the poor.
This leads to the last, but not the least, important part, race.
Wait a second. This is going to be also tied to income too, right?
You're going to ruin it. Income matters more in poor states than in rich states. Race is tied to the concept that in poor states, poor voters are most likely black and rich staters are most likely white. Thus, the racial patterns we see in voting is divided among the rich and the poor, especially in poor states. Ultimately, race does play a big factor in voting. Unlike religion, it is not affected by income. However, there is a direct correlation between the race of a voter and their income. The same pattern for how an African American might vote is the same pattern for how a poor voter might vote.
Earlier, me and Jen established the knowledge that cultural factors in voting have strong ties to income.
Well, to summarize, so do racial factors. They too have a strong tie to income. What we can derive then is that income is the best indicator of elections and voters because of the close ties it has with culture.
That covers all the different parts of our question, as you can see on the screen right now. This is the finished product for all our different analyses. As you can see, we cover all the different aspects of our question here. Now that our folder is completely finished, let's take a look at how we can apply this to different elections.
Let us take a look at the 2008 election. And here are the lists of the states from richest to poorest. Now, create a second list based on religious attendance. Then we create a third list based off African American voters.
We can see, and if you can see, if you pause the video, that the things we discussed are amply shown in the vote for red and blue.
Taking in these steps and rules, we can better predict future elections by looking at average voter income and the things attached to different income classes. People trying to win offices will use this to sway certain states by applying promising regulation based on income classes.
However, the 2016 election was a bit of an anomaly. As you can see by this map of the 2016 election, you can see that these traditionally held values are somewhat shattered now, with states like the ones listed here. While we have based all of our information on voting and income, this time there's a much bigger issue in mind: the attack on most Donald Trump-related policies. A few decades of investigation was defiled by this election and by this president. What does this mean for voting change? What does this mean for our pattern for voting based off income?
Now, there is an entire other video explaining this, and we'll add a link to it here. It doesn't fit into the context of this video, and it's already getting too long, so click here to see that.
That's all we have for you today, folks. I hope you plan on clicking on the link above. I know you will.
I'm Genevieve Domenico.
And I'm Jacob Q. Thanks for tuning in. You probably should have held it there for a second.
We can dance if we want to, we can leave your friends behind. Cause your friends don't dance, and if they don't dance, well, they're no friends of mine. See,